Okay, John, are you ready to rock?
Let's do it.
Okay. So we still got people rolling in here. I'm sure they'll be able to figure out what's going on. But this is the how to strengthen customer relationships with a brand-led community. So thank you so much to everybody that's here. Another great turnout for our second webinar in our in Tribes Industry Expert webinar series. It's really great to see. Because this is global and we see where everybody's coming in, we're going to say good morning, we're going to say good afternoon, and we're going to say good evening. So my name is Ari. I'm the Director of Customer Success at Tribe, and I'm super excited to get to host this Industry Expert webinar series and share the virtual stage today with our speaker, Jono Bacon. So let's jump right into it. So you're going to hear a few remarks from me, but you're not here to hear me speak. So I'm going to try to go as fast as possible. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what our webinar series is, the webinar format, the agenda, and then talk a little bit about our giveaway. We're then going to have Jono take the floor for the majority of the hour, and then we're going to save Q&A for the final 20 minutes, and then do a quick wrap up. So what is Tribe's industry expert webinar series? So the goal here is to bring industry experts to community builders like yourselves. So what does that mean exactly? We want to help community builders through collaboration and engagement with industry experts. Most of the content you'll experience in this webinar is agnostic to any community platform. The goal is to foster more best practices and share the knowledge with a wider group of people. Of course, for those not familiar with Tribe, we want to give you an awesome first impression. What better way than to introduce you to Tribe in such a selfless way? For those who are not familiar with us, Tribe empowers businesses to build unique and distinct custom communities under their brand. And for those of you who are familiar with us, this webinar series hopefully accomplishes its goal of driving more value beyond the tools we provide you through our platform to help you be more successful with your community building efforts. Finally, I want to share more about these webinars and where you can retrieve the content. Our previous webinar back in late September with Richard Millington is available within Tribe's Campfire community. Today's webinar will be posted in Campfire as well in case you want to revisit any of today's talking points for Jono. And we do intend to continue to do these webinars as the turnout has been great. So I'm just going to show you guys what it looks like. So this is the post after the first webinar we did with Richard Millington. It's inside of the community insights space. And you'll see I've posted the video and even told you like exactly where you need to listen so that you guys can jump. I know everybody's super busy. And then you can see, you know, there's a number of comments here and this actually ties into the giveaway. So please join our Campfire community, community.tribe.so, so that you guys can get access to the recording. So just a little bit of housekeeping because we're hosting a webinar. So it is being recorded. I think you guys just saw that we're going to share the recording. So if an important call comes up, your internet cuts out, we have you covered. We'll be sharing the webinar in the Campfire community like I just showed you guys. And as you might have noticed, everyone is also on mute. So we definitely encourage you to be vocal in the chat, as well as if you look at the bottom of the Zoom screen as well, you'll see a Q&A option. So please submit your Q&As, your questions as they come up. I'll be reviewing them while Jono is talking so that you don't have to wait till the end or write your question down. Just dump it right in there and I'll be picking them off and asking Jono for the final 20 minutes. And finally, we value your feedback. So we'll be sending out a post-webinar survey. We want to keep improving. This is our first webinar series and only the second one that we've done as part of this webinar series. And one of the things that we've actually actioned is in our last webinar, the Q&A was maybe 10 to 12 minutes. And a lot of people wanted a longer Q&A. So we bumped it to 20 minutes. So we're trying to do our best to action that feedback. So we'd love to hear from you. So enough about me. Let me introduce Jono. So just a little bit about Jono. He is a leading community and collaboration Strategy consultant, author, and speaker. He previously led a community at Canonical, GitHub, and XPRIZE, and works with a broad range of clients from large enterprises to early stage startups to help them build engaging, productive communities. He's the author of 6 books, including the award-winning People Powered: How Communities Can Supercharge Your Business, Brand, and Teams. He is a columnist at Forbes and published in Harvard Business Review, Fortune, Entrepreneur, and elsewhere. He's also an active speaker, having keynoted 80 plus conferences around the world, and an active investor and advisor in companies including Coda, Alien Vault, Mautic, and others. Jono is also generous. So we do have a giveaway. So Jono is going to be giving away 2 chapters of his book, People Powered. It's going to be distributed via email. In order to qualify, again, I'll just show you, come into not the Richard Millington post, but the one we're going to be posting immediately following the webinar with Jono. And if you come in here, you can see there were lots of posts here. All of these folks were sent a copy, 2 chapters of Richard's book as well. Please, we'd love to hear from you guys on what you've learned. That would be amazing. So enough about me. Jono, over to you. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let's transition over.
Let's do this. Hello, everybody. I hope you're all well. Welcome to my den of iniquity. Hang on. All right. Let's first of all make sure that the actual computer's working. Can you see my screen?
We can.
And you can hear me okay?
Yep.
All right. We made the magic work. So hello, everyone. My name is Jono. I'm so thrilled to be here. And thank you to my friends at Tribe for inviting me to come and speak. I did a little bit of work with Tribe where I wrote an ebook with them. And the team has been a real pleasure to work with. So, give them your time and attention. They're good people. All right. So we already kind of went through a little bit of the background here. Here's some of the companies that I've worked with. But one of the things that has been most interesting about being a consultant over the last 10, 12 years or whatever is seeing the insides of lots of different businesses and how they work. From big businesses like Deutsche Bank and Santander through to smaller early stage companies that are just getting going. Sometimes they're even in stealth. And one of the benefits of this is that it's provided this rich kind of tapestry of places where I can explore different ideas and approaches to building community. And what I'm covering in this session really is all about how do you consistently build a predictable community really in any setting. So whether you want to build a community in a big business, in a small company, whether you want to do it around your own kind of art, your music, like I build a community around my band. I have a metal band called Baron Carter. Or whether you want to build around political activism or government, or whatever. Everything I'm going to share with you in this session can be applied to any community, okay? Now, before we get started, there is one really important thing that we need to get straight, because everybody always asks me this when we get started, and that is, how on earth do you pronounce your name? I actually did a Twitter poll on this where I provided various options, and John O is how I say it. I am not called Barbara. Maybe at weekends, but that's my business and not yours. Anyway, so that's how I say it. But honestly, I don't particularly care how you call me. I want this to be interactive. Get us your questions, comments, whatever into the chat, okay? And my door is always nailed open, okay? So jono@jonobacon.com. If you've got any questions after this, you're more than welcome to send them over. All right. And thank you, by the way, Olivia, for loving my work setup. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. All right, so this story begins about 42 years ago when I was born, and I was raised in northern England, which is very picturesque and beautiful, but incredibly boring. Very, very boring place to grow up as a kid. Sorry if you're currently growing up or living in northern England. And when I was growing up, people used to always say this: people don't know their neighbors like they did back in the good old days. And what this was this kind of commentary that video games and movies and, all of that devil worshiping music is taking away people kind of hanging out in their streets and having street parties and people showing up in your doorstep, asking for a bowl of sugar and all that kind of stuff. And when I was kind of hearing this over and over again, it was in kind of the mid 90s when I was in my teens. And I wasn't seeing this. Like, I was seeing the opposite of this. The internet was bringing all kinds of amazing community development. We were seeing the birthplace of Wikipedia, where people were coming together to build and share knowledge together. In subsequent years, we've seen the incredible growth of open source that I've been very involved in over the course of my career. And open source is powering, the phone that's in your pocket, your computer, the electrical grid, your car. We've seen the incredible maker revolution, where bits and atoms have kind of been bridged together, and it's unlocked all kinds of innovation. We've seen the democratization of funding with crowdfunding. I mean, I'm not a crowdfunding expert, and I've run 2 crowdfunding campaigns. And it's incredible what you can do here. And we've seen community in many different places. Harley Davidson have got 1,700 local user groups all over the world. Salesforce and SAP have built communities of over 2 million members. Star Citizen raised over $100 million in funding for their game. Lego Ideas, they have people who come together to propose ideas for Lego sets that have been actually manufactured and sold to the general public. And even a good example is Hit Record, which is a great community that was set up by Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who, through pure happenstance, was speaking at the same conference that I was speaking at, and I ended up chatting to him backstage for a little bit. One of the coolest people, super down to earth, and ended up contributing some content to my book, People Powered. But Hit Record has people go out and someone will write a script, and somebody will do the green screen, and somebody will make the music, and people work together on the same productions, many of which have been showcased at Sundance. And all of this, this is all great communities in action. But to me, what kind of underpins this is Fitbit, as an example. When people go to the Fitbit community, which has got millions of members, they're not going to ask questions about the Fitbit watches or the Fitbit activity trackers. What they're interested in is, how do they improve their life, and how do they get a healthy, more balanced life? How do they do intermittent fasting? What kind of food should they be eating? How do they take the right kind of vitamins if they're going to have a surgery? Whatever it might be, it's focused on the outcome, not necessarily the product. So what we've seen over the years with communities is many, many different types of value, right? People come together and they provide support and engagement, which is a big chunk of our session today. When you build communities, it increases your brand recognition across the internet and across spaces where you ordinarily wouldn't be able to get brand recognition without expensive brand marketing. We've seen education and mentoring. We've seen people in your community creating content, running events, creating technology, such as we've seen with open source, product feedback, lead gen, building relationships. There's all kinds of amazing benefits from communities, but it all begs the question, where do you start? How do you do this? This all sounds great, right? Millions of community members and all these cool things that they can do, but how do you start? Well, I'm going to share with you in the next slide the fundamental premise of how you build great communities. And if you switch off in the next 5 minutes, you will take away probably one of the most critical things that I want to share with you today, okay? And that is that it's all about service, okay? It's all about, and this is fundamentally inspired by Seth Godin, is that I've seen this in my life, and I've seen this with other people, that when you're in service of other people and helping them to be successful, good things will happen to you, okay? This is the universal rule of the universe, okay? Is if you invest in other people's success, people want to spend time with you. People want to be reciprocal and contribute to your world and help you be successful as well, okay? And that's what community is really all about, right? Is that you're creating a shared space where people come together to help people be successful, okay? Now, why does this work? Well, the reason why is because fundamentally a community is a network of brains, okay? Let's say you've got a typical company and there's 50 people in a small company, 50 people in that company. Well, that's 50 people with 50 different sets of ideas and perspectives and experiences, and 50 people with a certain amount of time within each of their, worlds, okay? And when you build a company and you've got 50 employees, that's the available resources that you've got, right? You've got that and, a bucket of money and some assets, and that's what you've got to build your business. But think about a community. Well, with a community, you have no limitation. You could build a community of 50 people or 500 people or 5,000 people or 50,000 people. It can get exponentially larger, and each of those individual brains that are in that community are an asset that make the overall community stronger. And that's why communities are so powerful. So the fundamental question that we've got that we need to unlock in this session is, how do we connect those brains together to get all of that insight, expertise, skills out into a shared setting so we can harness that shared impact. And it becomes this almost like a machine that benefits everybody, okay? Now, what I'm going to be sharing with you in this session are some of the fundamental principles that I put in my book, People Powered. You know, as we already talked about, we're going to be sending you some free chapters from the book, but stay tuned to the end of the session as well, because I'm going to give you a link where you can go and get some, you know, lots of additional content that will help you through this journey. But I want to start right at the beginning, okay? And the first thing we need to do is to pick our community model. So there are many, many different communities out there. You know, you can have a knitting circle, or you could have a global technology community, and everything in between. But what community is going to be right for you, especially if you're going to be focused on customer service and customer support inside of your business, all right? Well, the first model is called the consumer model. And this is where people come together because they're fans of the same thing, whether it's Iron Maiden, Taylor Swift, whether it's Elgato PC gaming equipment, whether it's guitar playing, whether it's, you know, the Oculus Rift. People come together because they're passionate about the same thing. They're part of the same tribe. Okay, these communities are generally pretty easy to put together. You just create a shared space, such as a forum or a Slack channel. Don't use the Slack channel. Slack's not great for building communities, but you create a shared space. You know, it could be a community, obviously community platform, and they hang out, and that's kind of it, really. But the real value comes in the second model, which is called the champion model, and this is where most kind of customer support success organizations tend to focus, and this is where you bring your customers together, or prospective customers together, into the same place. And then you create an environment where they can also generate content, participate in events, provide support, where they support the overall success of the group. Okay, so for example, when I started out in community, I built a community called Linux UK, which was around this kind of burgeoning new operating system called Linux. And everybody who came together into the community didn't just kind of get together to consume the same information, but people contributed news, people created content, people ran events, people worked on the same software platform. All these kind of pieces kind of amalgamated together. And this is primarily the model we're going to be covering inside of this session. But there is another model, which is called the collaborator model. And this is people who really work on the same software. Okay, so this is more for engineering communities. Now, importantly, if you are in the software engineering world, just as an aside, this is less to do with customer success and customer support. It's important to differentiate between two models in this, and they're called inner and outer. So inner collaborator communities are where people work on the same open source project. Okay, so Ubuntu, for example, was the first major project that I contributed to. Outer communities are where people build technology that runs on another platform, such as building an app for the Android App Store or the Apple App Store, building a plugin for WordPress, whatever it might be. These are very, very different communities, because with an inner community, when people are working on the same open source project, you need to make sure that everybody's in the same level playing field, okay? If there's a power differential between the company that's building the platform, such as Canonical building Ubuntu, and contributors, then it can cause all kinds of interpersonal problems, okay? But with the outer model, all developers care about is building an app and building their app as quickly and as easily as possible, okay? And that's access to a good SDK, great documentation, all these different pieces, okay? So does that make sense? Let's first of all start. I want to make this interactive. Pop into the chat if this is making sense so far. Give me a yes, thumbs up, absolutely, you know, +1. Or you could say, no, Jono, I'm completely and utterly confused. I have no idea what you're talking about. Yes. So we see Tim, Hannah, Eric, okay, Dillinger. Brilliant, Robert. Brilliant, excellent. Thank you for paying attention. Okay, so the key thing here really is that we don't want to start with platforms. We want to start with strategy, okay? So when we pick our model, let's say we're going to focus on the champion model, okay? And it's easy for us to start talking about platforms like Tribe or like Discourse or whatever it might be. But the most important thing that we do is we actually start out with figuring out what is the value proposition for the community that we want to build, okay? And here's the thing. This is super important. Like one of the things that I've seen across my career as a common mistake that community managers make and businesses make is that they leap in with tactics. They immediately start talking about content and platforms and configuration, and that's not the way to do it. The key thing is that the best experiences are journeys, okay? And let me illustrate this, and we'll talk about how we build our community journey. So how many of you, pop this into the chat, have been to a theme park like Disney World? Yep, say Put your hand up or +1 or say, yes, I've been to it. Tell us the theme park that you've been to. Okay. Love theme parks. From Ari, Sandra, awesome. Yeah. Universal Studios. Yes, I love Universal. In fact, there's a great YouTube channel called Defunct Land where they talk about the history of some of these old rides that you may have been on. But the reason why Disney, for example, has been so successful is because every part of the journey when you show up at Disney is very, very carefully curated, from how you park your car to how you buy your tickets, where you go around the park, where the parades are, what time the restaurants open. They track absolutely every single element of your experience there to maximize the guest experience and to get as many people through the gate at the same time. Okay, it's the same thing with good restaurants, right? When you go to a good quality restaurant, it doesn't have to be an expensive restaurant or a Michelin star restaurant, but from how you show up and if you either how you get your table or if you valet your car, for example, when they bring you your water, when they bring you the menus, making sure that they don't pester you too much, everything is carefully designed. It's the same thing with a video game. When I bought my son Luigi's Mansion 3, for example, for the Switch, the first couple of levels are all about familiarizing yourself with the controls, giving you a couple of simple tasks to achieve so you can have that kind of unstoppable momentum. It's all about getting you comfortable. It's a carefully designed experience. We have to do the same thing with our community. Here is the statistic that you're not going to want to hear about communities. And that is that 1 in 5 members of your community will be active. Okay. So for every 10 people that come into your community, only 2 of them are going to be posting, responding, and engaging. However, 8 of them will be watching, they'll be observing, they'll be enjoying the community experience, but they won't be super active in it. Okay. So what we need to do to get those active people in it is we need to give them a simple reason to participate. And then what happens is when people come in and start viewing the community experience, they're going to be much more likely to participate a little bit later on. Okay. The way in which we do this is we tap into the psychology of why people join communities, and it looks like this. Okay. Now, fundamentally, right at the beginning, and I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on this because I don't want to turn this into a boring social science seminar. But what happens is when people join a community, they first of all need to get access. This is making it easy to kind of get started to join, giving them an incentive to join. We want to start getting them to contribute in some way. Okay. Now, when they start contributing, posting, replying, liking, voting in polls, those kinds of things, it builds a sense of self-respect. They feel like they're able to actually add some value to the group. Okay. And this usually happens after the access. They've maybe been reading for a little while, then they start lightly contributing, they start, participating in polls and responding to some posts and things like that. Once they start contributing and getting that sense of self-respect over and over again, it builds a sense of dignity. They feel like, oh, okay, I'm actually adding some value here. I'm not just kind of sucking up oxygen. And when they feel that sense of dignity, it gives them a sense of confidence. And that's when they feel like they can have an impact. That's when they can show up with new ideas, with fresh ideas. And that's when they feel a sense of belonging. And belonging is the ultimate treasure in communities, because when people feel a sense of belonging, they're basically in it for the long haul. They're going to feel like they would be missed if they left. So each of you, just think about your lives, whether it's a family that you're a member of, whether it's a company that you work at, it may be a World of Warcraft club that you're in, it might be an online community that you're a member of, but every one of you knows what belonging feels like, right? And it feels good. It's like that scene in Cheers, the beginning of Cheers, where they walk in and everybody says, hey, Sam, that kind of thing. That's what we want to design now, community. So fundamentally, we want to get people from access through to belonging, but we do have a challenge to deal with as we get people into this kind of like habit of participating. And that is that, well, let me illustrate this. I actually worked with some people at MIT, and they did this groundbreaking kind of scientific study into what is typically going on in a typical moment of a typical human brain. And they actually managed to take a photo of what the typical human brain is dealing with any particular moment. And this is what the photo looks like, okay? It looks like this. Our world is filled with distractions. It's filled with junk. Whether you're watching the second season of The Tiger King, whether you're still trying to get a PlayStation 5, whether you're trying to figure out whether the Omicron variant is going to be dangerous to you and your family, okay? There's a million distractions, okay, that are standing our way of building a community. Why should people care about your community instead of all of these other things that they can be distracted by? Why should they care? Well, To understand how we get people into our community, we now need to ask an important question, which is what makes people want to do something new, right? Why should they come into your community? Why should they choose that over anything else in the world? And the answer to this question is value, okay? Value is the most critical thing to bake into your community, okay? The tricky thing is that when we define value, and usually at the beginning of any kind of endeavor with an organization, when we start talking about value, we immediately start talking about tactics, right? And that's when we start getting distracted by platforms and incentives and rewards and content and webinars and social media and all this kind of stuff, okay? But what we want to start out with is to define our value proposition for our community, and then to make sure that we are always reinforcing that in the community that we're actually designing, okay? Now, we can do this by breaking it into two different pieces, right? We've got the value for our company, and then there's the value for our community. And it's important to differentiate between these, because when you're building, you know, an effective platform, a community for handling customer support and engagement, the priorities and the incentives of your community members and your customers is very different to your company. So in your community, people typically care about things like this. They want to solve their problems with your product. They want to develop skills. They want to network with other community members. They want to develop their career. They just want to have fun, right? They want it to be enjoyable and interesting, okay? But for your company, it's a very different set of priorities. Usually you want to grow your user base and your customer base. You want to develop your ecosystem. You want to build new features. You want to solve support issues. You want to grow your brand. But what's important is, first of all, to define the value that you want to see in it for your company and with your community, and get that crisp before you move on. But when you're thinking about value, what I would encourage you to do is ask this question, okay? And I don't have a slide to illustrate this, so you're just going to have to zone in on what I'm saying right now. And that is, what are the pain points and roadblocks that are standing in the way of my customers? Like when they wake up in the morning, what sucks about their life, okay? And the reason why I'm asking this is because that is going to answer the question of what value means to you. So imagine I'm a dentist, right? And there's two people in front of me, two potential patients. One person wants to get their teeth whitened. The other person's got horrendous toothache. Which one of those two people is going to demand my services as a dentist more urgently? I think we'd all agree it's going to be the person who's got horrendous toothache, because pain triggers decision-making more efficiently than mystical opportunity in the future. Everybody on LinkedIn is promising us all of this opportunity that they can unlock if we only pay attention to them. I get 10 LinkedIn messages a day from people promising me all of this opportunity that they can unlock. But if somebody comes to me and says, Jono, you know that thing that really annoys you about your world? I can fix that. I'm going to be interested, okay? So that's the value proposition. Think about what is the pain and the roadblocks that you can break down for your customers. It could be onboarding them quickly and efficiently. It could be figuring out how your product gets baked into their business. It could be helping to train their teams to use the product more effectively. It could be cutting down paperwork and administrative work. That's the key thing you want to figure out when you design the value proposition for your community. Does that make sense? Thumbs up? Thumbs up? Yes, +1. Just let me know in the chat, okay? Now, the tricky thing here is that, again, when we start talking about value, then when we start getting into tactics, it starts getting really complicated, okay? And we start to lose the value prop. So what we want to do is, as we're designing our community structure, that journey, we want to make sure that we're asking the right questions at different phases of the journey. And this is where my community participation framework comes into play. I started designing this about 6 or 7 years ago. And I wanted to create a single model that encapsulates the things that we need to care about at different points of the community journey, okay? Now, I want to break this down. I'm going to go through this fairly quickly because I want to make sure that we do leave some time for Q&A, okay? The first thing we do is we define who our audience is, right? So who's your customer? What do they care about? What are their pain points? What are their roadblocks? We've already talked about that a little bit, but really is that you don't need to care about what cornflakes what they're eating for their breakfast in the morning. Just care about what are the pain points and what are the roadblocks? What keeps them awake at night? What, when they wake up in the morning, do they dread about their day? Okay, that's going to form your value proposition. Now what we want to do is want to get them to a first piece of value as quickly and as easily as possible. And this is where we onboard them. Okay, now the on-ramp is often the biggest area of mistake where new community managers tend to screw up. Okay, the star that you can see in this diagram is the first piece of value you want to get them towards. It could be asking a question, getting it answered. It could be consuming a useful piece of content. It could be contributing a useful piece of content. It could be speaking at one of your events. It could be creating a plugin for your platform, whatever it might be. Okay. Now, typically, the onboarding journey looks a little bit like this, and I'm going to spin through this. The first step is that we need to give them a reason to come into your community. Why should they care? What value are you going to provide? What pain and roadblocks are you going to break down for them? The second step is how do they get set up with the tool? So how do they register for your platform and start engaging? The third thing is how do they develop the skills that they need to actively use your platform and come and get involved? How do they post? How do they reply? How do they fill in their profile? The fourth step is give them something to do. One of the first things I always recommend people do in new communities is ask your community members to go and introduce themselves. Say who they are, where they're from, what they're interested in, and an interesting fact that nobody knows about them, okay? The fifth step here is then you provide a place where they can solve problems, so you can break down those pain points and roadblocks. And then the sixth step is where you validate them repeatedly in the journey with incentives and rewards, okay? So when they've done that first, when they've unlocked that first piece of value, recognize them, which I'm going to get to in a second in my session, okay? So make sure you break this down. It's really important because if you go out there and all too often people in community, people seem to talk about is awareness and evangelism. And that's important. Going to conferences and speaking and social media and webinars and things like that. That's so important. But if you don't get this onboarding right, when people show up your front door and they can't figure out how to get to that first piece of value, you're going to lose them. Okay. And evangelism is expensive. Onboarding isn't. So that's why it's super critical. Now, the next step of the journey is that community members fundamentally go through 3 phases. They start out as casual members, then they become regulars, and then they become core members. And let's kind of zone in on this. This is really important. When they start out as casual members, so they've come into your community, they've experienced a piece of value. Let's say they asked a question and they got a response. So they've solved a problem with your product, okay? They're in the casual phase. This means that they can be distracted by the PlayStation, Tiger King 2, and whatever's going on in the news. So we need to keep them coming back for 2 months. Now, you may be thinking, all right, Bacon, why 2 months? The reason why is that scientifically, it takes about 66 days for us to build a habit. So if you want to exercise more often, if you want to lose weight, if you want to spend more time on your hobby, if you want to get good at something, you need to do it repeatedly for at least 2 months. So it stops being a thing I know I should do, and it starts becoming something that you feel like you should do. That's how long it takes to rewire your brain for it to become habitual. Okay, so 2 months is the goal that we've got there to keep them coming back. Now, a lot of people in this casual phase, they may experience imposter syndrome. This is especially prevalent with people who are in underrepresented groups. So you need to make it super welcoming and very, very simple and engaging and fun for them to keep coming back. Now, when they become regulars, this is when they're coming back every week. They've been coming back every week for 2 or 3 months. At this point is when you can start having a conversation with them about them becoming contributors. This is when you can go to them and say, hey, would you be interested in writing a blog post? Would you be interested in speaking at one of our events? Would you be interested in contributing to this working group? Okay. If you ask them that in the casual phase, they're too early in the process. They're not going to say yes, or they may say yes and they won't come through. And then in the third phase, in the core phase, this is when these are your super fans. These are people coming back every single week, and they care not just about their own community experience, but they care about other people having a good community experience. Now, people often ask me, how do you know when people are your core members? You will know because you'll know them by name. They'll be the people you will always say to your friends, your colleagues, that person is awesome, okay? Those are your core members because they're selfless. They care about other people's journey, okay? Now, you may be thinking, all right, so we have a great value proposition, which is the, we know who our audience are, the pain points, the roadblocks. We offer that in our community. We onboard them quickly and efficiently. We keep them coming back for a couple of months, and then we go through this process. But how do you keep them moving from casual to regular to core? Well, this is where the role of incentives come in. And what we do is we drop in little incentives in these different 3 phases, and that keeps them coming back, okay? Now, incentives are a really important part of the community journey because they're everywhere, okay? think about airline miles, for example, United Mileage Plus. If you keep flying with United, then you go up to silver, gold, platinum, and then 1K. Okay. If you think about when you go to a coffee shop and you get your 10 coffee stamps, and then you get a free coffee, or you've got Reddit Karma, you've got trophies in video games, you've got badges on Fitbit. Incentives are everywhere. And the reason why they're everywhere is because psychologically, we've all got one of these in our heads, is that our brain is divided into two different pieces. It's called system one thinking and system two thinking. And this is the study of behavioral economics. System one is our primeval monkey brain, right? And system two is our conscious thought, where we're evaluating the world around us. What you might not know is that the primeval monkey brain is in the driving seat and massively influences our decision making. So the reason why incentives and rewards work is because when we are when we as a species originally came into existence, right? We started to collect resources around us, wanting to make sure that we were near water, wanting to make sure we had a food source, wanting to make sure we could protect our families, protect our tribes. We're hunter-gatherers, right? By definition, as human beings. So therefore, that monkey brain is always wanting to collect things around that. So that's one of the reasons why we collect things. That's one of the reasons why we hoard things. That's one of the reasons why your garage is full of boxes that you haven't looked in for the last 5 years. All right. So this is one of the reasons why incentives and rewards work. So when you think about those three phases, casual, regular, and core, there's two ways in which you can apply incentives and rewards into those different areas. Okay. The first one is what I call stated incentives. And this is where you say, if you do this thing, you get this thing, right? So for example, if you come and join our community, then you will get this reward, right? If you sign up, okay? And we see examples of this like the GitHub Gamer. This is where if you join this competition and you win a prize. If you join the HackerOne platform and you start contributing to it, then you go up the leaderboard and it unlocks various benefits. If you go to Stack Overflow or Stack Exchange, if you, for example, in the middle of the screenshot, if your question is favorited by 25 users, you will get the favorite question badge. And that's been awarded 51,000 times. So you state, if you do this thing, you get this thing. And there are various platforms like Ribbon that you can use, for example, where you can trigger based upon when people have achieved a certain outcome, they get this particular benefit, okay? So the first time this is good for first, the first time someone speaks at one of your events, the first time someone answers a question in your community, the first time someone comes to one of your events, the first time someone contributes a plugin to your ecosystem, the first time somebody reaches a new milestone in their community journey, when they go through the regular, for example, this is where you start applying the rewards, okay? Makes sense? Thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs up. Now, submarine incentives, okay? These are much more interesting in nature. This is where when you, what you fundamentally do is you detect human behavior, and then based upon the behavior you want to see, and then you trigger it with a reward. And I'll give you an example of this. So in many communities that I work with, what I say to companies is identify, break your community journey into kind of like silver, gold, and platinum journeys, kind of like your casual, regular, and core, and set a specific criteria for that first step in the journey, right? And when somebody becomes a silver member, or maybe a bronze member, depending on your terminology, when they trigger all of those different metrics, it could be, okay, they've filled in their profile, they've posted 10 things, they've had 5 things liked, this kind of amalgamation of criteria. Then what you do is you recognize them, and you just recognize them publicly. And this is a good example. The one on the left is the Zeppelin community. The one on the right is an Intel community that I worked on. When people hit this silver member, we just went into the community and said, congratulations to these folks for doing this amazing work. We really appreciate it. It provides social gratification, social recognition, and it means a lot to them, okay? Another example of this, again, is you can use platforms like Ribbon, where you can, and I'm not on commission for Ribbon, it's just a great platform, where when you detect somebody, for example, has submitted a code contribution and it's been merged into a program, into a repository, then it triggers an opportunity for them to get a gift card. It could be the first time somebody goes and speaks at an event and, their session is rated over 4 stars, okay? So you essentially create the automation to detect that behavior. And one of the reasons why this works so well is because it comes across as a random act of kindness, okay? If you do these things, if you take a stated approach and you say, if you achieve this outcome, you will get this reward, then people will often try and game the system. But with the submarine model, you never tell them what the criteria is. They just detect it. You just detect it and they get the reward. For example, with opensource.com, one of the things that they do is if you write a certain amount of content for their site, then they will send you a backpack. With Mattermost, one of the things that they used to do, I don't know if they do it right now, is the first time you got your first contribution into the project, they'd send you a mug. They wouldn't tell you they were going to do this, that if you get your first contribution and you get the mug, this is just what happens, okay? It's incredibly powerful. Another example is opensource.com, where if you are one of the most active contributors to their platform, opensource.com is a community-driven online magazine, basically. Then they'll fly you out to Raleigh to a conference called All Things Open. You'll get to meet the team, okay? And that guy who they're all pointing at was the CEO of Red Hat, who was the company behind it, okay? Now, before I wrap up, I just want to cover two quick things, okay? So we've walked through this model, but you may be thinking, how do I get people into my community? Well, the way in which we do this is with content, social media, email, webinars, and events. If you go and do a search for my name on YouTube, I put loads of videos online where you can go and discover how to do this more. And I send emails out for how to do this, which I'll get to in a second as well. But then for the engagement piece, remember, focus on that first contribution, getting people up that on-ramp. Make sure that you mentor people in the casual phase, make them feel comfortable and welcome. You unlock collaboration in the regular phase. And then in the core phase, you focus on wisdom. How can the people who are most invested in your community guide you to see your blind spots, to guide them through that journey? And we drop lots of individual incentives to keep them moving forward, okay? Now, I want to make sure we're a little over time because I had a lot of content to go through. So I'm just going to cover two quick things and then we'll get into Q&A. So feel free, while I'm talking about this, to get your questions into the chat. As I mentioned earlier on, I wrote this book called People Powered. I'm really proud of it. It won a Business Book Awards award last year. It's 5 stars on Amazon and Goodreads. It's a bestseller on Amazon and Porchlight. Now, if you go to this link, if you go to jonobacon.com/pack, we're already Tribe are going to send you some free chapters. I will be sending those out as well. I also send out audiobook chapters, but I send a whole load of content out: templates, cheat sheets, free training, tips, best practices. I do random mentoring sweepstakes where I'll offer free consulting for folks. Loads and loads of value, okay? I don't spam you with sales stuff or anything like that. I'm a big believer in, again, what Seth Godin said, kind of provide lots and lots of value to your audience, and that builds goodwill, and that's how we kind of develop and grow together. All right, and that's it. I am out. Let's now do some questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Thank you so much, Jono. That was amazing. So we got a number of questions here. So I'm just going to read them out to you. So first one was actually plopped into the main chat from Tim. How significant are the differences in transforming casual to regular to core for a volunteer group versus a product or business entity?
It's fundamentally the same principle. When people step into the casual phase, they're curious. Their interest is being piqued. It's like them switching on the video game for the first time, and they don't know what to expect, but they have lots of other things that are telling them to do something else. And that's why we need to make that casual phase just absolutely rocking, right? And the goal you want to go for here is unstoppable momentum, where when they go into the casual phase, what they do is they, let's say in a product community or in a volunteer community, they ask questions and people get help. Whenever they show up, make sure you recognize them, you validate them, you make them feel welcome, okay? One of the things I often recommend to my clients is you want to engage in awkward small talk. Like when before COVID, when we used to have parties, people would show up at your house. The very first people who show up at your house probably don't know each other. So what you do is you kind of introduce them to each other, and then you try to find something that they've got in common so they can then start having a conversation together, and then you move on to something else. So we have to engage in lots of awkward small talk to keep them coming back. And when you do that, and when they keep coming back and they keep getting value because you keep rewarding them and incentivizing them to come back, that's when they then move into the regular phase. That's exactly the same whether it's in the product community or whether it's in the volunteer community.
Awesome. So you made actually a short comment about Slack not being a good fit for community. So I personally, I can even speak to my LinkedIn feed being riddled with people promoting their Slack community. So why do you believe that Slack is not a good fit to run a community?
Yeah. So the reason why, so there's two types of communication in the world. I call it structured and unstructured. So structured communication, for example, is where you go to Stack Overflow or Stack Exchange and you ask a question and you get a response. Or for technical people, you post an issue in GitHub and you get a response. And it would be inappropriate to do anything other than provide a response in that setting. Everything else is unstructured communication, right? So forums, chat channels, Slack, whatever else. Unstructured communication can be broken down into two types, real-time and batch. So real-time is Slack, batch are forums, community platforms like that. The problem with real-time unstructured communication is that you need to have other people online at that time to respond to that conversation. So if you have a community that's primarily based in North America, it means that people based in India or Japan or even Europe, it's going to be more difficult for them to have a good community experience because a lot of the people are probably going to be in bed or they're going to be spending time with their families in the evenings. So that's strike number one. Strike number two is that Slack history is impossibly difficult to navigate. And it's not Slack's problem, it's because it's a linear stream of consciousness. So the problem is that I go and ask a question in a chat channel, someone called Sarah provides an answer to my question. Let's say 3 weeks later, Ari goes into the channel and asks a question, the same question, you're going to need to have another Sarah to provide an answer to that because you can't go and find that previous conversation in Slack history. Whereas with a forum style platform, you can go and search for it and you can find it. That's strike number two. And strike number three is that Slack is not indexed onto Google. So if you go and ask a question in a public community, so you go to Fitbit and ask a question and then get an answer, that is not only searchable, but that then gets indexed in Google. And the place where people start to solve their problems isn't your community, it's Google. So when they type a question into Google, you want your community to appear in the search results, and then it will bring people in. So that's the reason why Slack is great for one-on-one conversation and for small teams. It's awful for building communities.
Awesome. Thanks for that. So when building a community from scratch and you provided guidance for like common modules and spaces to include, the one you mentioned was the introduction space. What are other key spaces that you would kind of front load at the beginning of that journey that you talked about?
Yeah, so I tend to think of a community as a bit like a Chinese maze, right? Where I'm going to try and visualize this. And this is almost certainly going to look terrible. But, you've got the bit in the middle, right? And then you've got multiple entrances to the maze, all kind of around. And people can kind of go around, but they always end up in the middle. So the middle that you have at the beginning of a community is getting people to sign up, right? If we can't capture a sign up from them, we can't then engage with them, okay? So this is lead gen, right? To use a sales term, is we need to get people into the point where they feel sufficiently motivated to sign up, because then we can start nurturing them with email and other content. So that then begs the question, how do you get people to sign up? Well, the first thing you should do is to run a series of what marketing people call lead magnets. So running webinars and workshop sessions, social media, content marketing, I, for example, have built a training course on how to do content marketing well. Things like that are super important, okay? And it all brings people in, so they build trust in what you're doing, and then they sign up. So when they sign up, that's the first step, is getting people to sign up. And webinars and workshops are particularly good for this. Everybody had to do it for this webinar, right? Is that you had to pop in your email address and first name. And most people, generally 60% of people won't show up to online events, but you'll still have their contact details so you can send them super high quality, valuable stuff via email. And when you sign up for my email, when you go to Jono Bacon, www.jonobacon.com/pack, you'll see the kind of email that I send out and the kind of value that I like to offer. But when they've signed up, then what you want to do is you want to keep pulling them in to give them a reason to participate. So for example, emailing them really interesting, relevant conversations that are occurring in the community, running online events for your community. Again, if you go to YouTube and do a search for my name, the most recent video on my channel, which I actually put out a couple of months ago because I haven't been uploading YouTube videos very much recently, I've been busy, is how to run an online community event, run those kinds of events. And this all builds that relationship with them. Okay, so you've got to Give them the reason why people will come back is if they can keep coming back to find solutions for those pain points and roadblocks, right? That's the most critical thing. So break it into two pieces. Get people into your maze, get them to sign up. And then once they've signed up, give them lots of reasons to keep coming into your community platform where they can consume this great content. And that will encourage them and give them a reason to then come and actively participate themselves.
Fantastic. Those are some good insights. So another question came in about issues you'd anticipate or feel you might face if your customers are not super digital people. So they do simple and physical work, but managers want to offer a community platform to them. How do you solve some of those issues around those that might be reluctant to adopt a digital online community?
Yeah. I think those communities are often some of the most fun to set up. One time I worked with a union of people who put, paint and glass into buildings. And we built a community for them. And their primary mode of communication was fax, which was an interesting community to kind of focus on. The thing I would recommend for people who are digitally less comfortable is to focus on email, is to set up an email list. You can use platforms like ConvertKit or MailChimp or whatever, and to get people to sign up. Again, do all those campaigns where you send them great content. It could be ebooks, it could be webinars, workshops. You bring them in, they sign up, and then what you do is you send them lots and lots of amazing content. You don't have a platform like a forum style platform. You don't even bother with that. But what you do is you do run online events. It's very, very, you can build communities physically in person. You could run in-person events, but then you're limiting yourself to a geographical area, which is fine if you're building. Like the very first community I ever set up when I started out was a local user group in the town that I lived in. And we met in this guy's living room. And we drank beer and talked about open source. And it was great. But if you want to build a global community, there has to be a digital component. It's impossible to do that locally. So the best way to do that is to bring people into webinar style events, because literally all they need is a link that they can click on. If you use a platform like Webinar Jam, which I use, they just click on that link, they can open up in their web browser, and then they can go and enjoy the content and participate. So, we're back. One of the best things that you can do as well is to focus on intrinsic rewards, right? So instead of sending people t-shirts and swag and things like that, that's fine, but shipping is a pain in the backside. What you really want to focus on is going to be recognition, thanks, and appreciation. That's gonna help you. Hey, Ari, we're just running through the Q&A for the last couple of minutes. I'm just reading through them.
Wonderful. Thank you for the improvisation while I danced in and out there.
No worries. Don't watch the recording because I started a rumor about you.
Okay, good.
Yeah, and no one tell him what it is.
We'll be sure to edit it out.
I was just kidding. Yeah. Anyway, what issues we might face if our customers or our community platform are not super digital people? Oh, we already covered that. I think we covered everything so far. I think we've been through we covered all the Q&A. Awesome.
So we do have one more minute left. So if that's a wrap, Jono, thank you again for the amazing improvisation here. I can just quickly wrap things up. So Jono, thank you so much again for all the valuable insights that you shared with us today. You've empowered many more globally, like we talked about at the beginning, with your proven techniques on building community. So what's next here? So we're wrapping up. So just a reminder that we're going to be sharing the recording both by way of email as well as in Tribe's Campfire community. And again, inside of the post-webinar email, we do have a survey. We would really, really appreciate if everybody takes a minute to offer your feedback to us on how you think we can continue to improve the webinars that we're going to be releasing. And we hope to share what our next webinar is early in 2022 over the next couple of weeks. So Jono, thank you so much again. We really appreciate it. And thank you to everybody for investing the time today with us.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.